Hi, this is Fred Smith and you're listening to Retrospectives with John Broughton on KC Radio 97.7 FM.
Fake news and liars make predictions so dire about the fall of empire. Well, folks, this is...
Alrighty, we'll just start just talking a little bit about your initial attraction to music, where that came from.
Well, when I was in my when I was 9 or 10, this cartoon used to come on the TV on Saturday morning. It was a Beatles cartoon.
Oh yes,
it had all that music in it. So I think I got fixated with music then, just listening to those Beatles songs on the cartoon every Saturday morning before we all went out to football and when my parents were trying to get some sleep.
Of course, your dad was also a diplomat, I believe. So you've followed in his footsteps in that sense. Was there any music involvement there with your parents as well?
Absolutely zero. They had about half a dozen records in their collection, including Simon Garfunkel's "Bridge Over Troubled Water," Beatles' "Hey Jude," and Auntie Jack sings "Wollongong." And that was about it. But that's not a bad start, you know.
No, that's not a bad start at all. So what about songwriters? Who were the first songwriters to really get your ears?
Well, as I said, the Beatles, but subsequently, you know, just the narrative writers like Paul Simon, the Americans, Bob Dylan, obviously, eventually. Neil Young took me I remember zeroing in on Neil Young when I was 11 and 12, and for some reason it was something really compelling about what he was doing. But I've since sort of broadened my palette pretty significantly. So I just like the writers who have a bit of a narrative feel to them. I find it easy to follow a narrative.
Has your relationship to music altered or changed, do you think, in any way as a result of your diplomatic work?
Well, unequivocally, yeah. I mean, it's put me in some interesting places, including Bougainville and Solomon Islands, subsequent to the conflicts in both of those places. And then, of course, more recently, Afghanistan. You know, before that, I was playing drinking songs in pubs, you know. And so, you know, there were stories that I felt compelled to tell through song, and that's really, I suppose, been a defining feature of my songwriting output.
You do have covered some serious subject matter in your songs through the years, but you've never lost the humorous element to your work either. How important has that been to you to maintain that balance?
Oh, well, it's important to me, but I think it's also, you know, makes it all a bit more digestible for a listener. You know, I think that when people have something in a song that they can laugh about, they're more open to the subject matter. Firstly, but the other thing, of course, is that you know, these environments are funny. Uruzgan province, a bunch of guys mucking around in the desert trying to get impossible things done. Complex tribal environment with a heavy overlay of Islam and the Pashtun language. I mean, it's ripe for comedy. You know what I mean? And yeah. Tragedy, and there was a lot of both. You know, so it was quite extreme.
You certainly broke the mould of what many people would consider the stereotypical view of what a diplomat is. Did music and diplomacy always seem like a natural match for you?
No, they seemed to argue initially. When I started out sort of forging a second career as a songwriter, you know, it felt very like there were competing forces, partly from my time and attention, but partly, of course, because you know, in the field of diplomacy, you say things for the effect they'll have, whereas in music or art, you tend to say things because you think they're true. But I seem to have been able to walk a line there and got away with it thus far.
In your childhood years, you moved around a lot, of course, as a result of your dad's work. Did you take any musical influences from any of the places that you lived during those years?
Certainly, yeah. I mean, I learned to play guitar in Philippines, which had a heavy Spanish influence. So I learned that kind of Spanish style of classical guitar, and that informs the way I play, and in turn it informs the way I write.
Have you ever pondered what career path you might have gone down had you grew up in a totally different environment?
No, I've never pondered that. I mean, my initial aspirations would have played professional tennis.
Oh, yeah.
Not that I was any good at it, it was just like tennis. But I suppose, if my dad had been an undertaker, I might have followed him into that field. But he was in the Foreign Affairs Service, having started out as a school teacher, actually. But he joined Foreign Affairs in 1969, and I mean, I grew up listening to him and my uncles, as they were called, talking shop, and it seemed fascinating to me. And so that's the way I went when I graduated from university. Yeah. But then I graduated and joined Foreign Affairs, and it was then that I started writing song, which was inconvenient. Sort of created this confusion with me. I was torn between a promising career as a diplomat and an unpromising career as a folk singer. But rather than make any decisions on the matter, I simply forged a path forward through a very sophisticated process of indecision.
So was there any...
and now have two careers, I suppose.
Was there any particular defining moment when you realised that you actually could combine the two?
I think Bougainville, when I went there, suddenly everything I was good at became useful, because we were there in a peace monitoring group, an Australian government, New Zealand government peace monitoring group, which was unarmed. Because it was unarmed, we had to communicate, and that was in a culture where the people love music. Every village has a band with a bunch of guitars, and you don't have to explain what you're doing in a village when you've got a guitar. And as I said, we couldn't intimidate anyone because we had no weapons, so we had to communicate and build confidence in the peace process. People are not going to surrender their weapons unless they feel like the peace process is going to work. So as a medium of communication, the guitar suddenly became very useful and was sort of embraced as part of the formal patrol structures that we were working with as we travelled around the island in schools and hospitals and churches and things like that. So suddenly, as I said, everything I was good at became useful, and the simpatico between the two pursuits suddenly became obvious, or more obvious than the conflict.
Yeah. You hosted your own radio show up there in Bougainville, I believe, too, did you?
Yeah, it was called Saturday Night Party, which is Pidgin for Saturday Night Party. I could speak Pidgin, and me and a DJ called Aloysius had a show every Saturday night, and we'd take requests and play them, and we'd talk about developments in the peace process and answer correspondence, and then we had a little gardening section where the local resident botanist would come in and give advice on how to dispose of garden waste or how to plant vanilla, and then we'd finish up with a Bible reading every night. At which point the town generator would run out of fuel and the whole radio station would shut down, and we'd clutch around for a torch and make our way out of the building. But radio was important, because Bougainville it's just a large island with a bunch of villages scattered all around, and no real means of joining them up through communications, and the roads are not too good, but they're improving, and so as a means of getting messages out to people, the radio is pretty important.
Yeah. Talk about your songwriting. Do you think your songwriting may have gone down a completely different path without the career in foreign affairs?
I really can't say, I really can't say where it would have gone. As I said, before that I was playing in pubs and cabaret venues. I was writing sort of political satire and a bit of drinking songs, and I just don't know where it would have gone. There's only so many love songs a white man can write without exhausting the audience's interest. I just don't know where it would have gone. You don't know the life you might have lived if you hadn't lived it.
Yeah, true.
I mean, I write what I live, really. I think in the order of priorities, life comes ahead of art for me, and art ensues. Best to let it ensue rather than pursue it.
Just talking about your time in Afghanistan, and just wondering to what extent your experiences of being there and seeing things firsthand influence the songs in comparison to, say, someone who might be writing those types of songs as an observer from afar.
Well, I think you can only really do a good job of writing those songs if you're there, partly because, on a day-to-day basis, you're moved by various experiences, whether they be funny or whether they be the death of a soldier. When a soldier dies on a sunny day in Afghanistan, everyone on the base feels the pain, and you go to the wrap service and you see what happens, and you talk to their mates, and you feel it. But apart from the fact that you feel it, you also experience the details. You're across the full palette of details that explain any given situation, and it's those details which make the song credible and enables you to move the narratives forward and all that. So I think I can't imagine going on a sort of 1 month sort of artistic sabbatical to these environments and being able to do anything. You've got to be in there with your shoulder to the wheel, I think. That's my view anyway.
I imagine you'd go through a range of emotions while writing these songs about those experiences. For yourself personally, did you find it a therapeutic experience writing those songs?
Yeah, I think I did. I think I found it therapeutic writing those songs, but more than that, I found it therapeutic performing those songs. Just getting them out and telling those stories over and over again, as I've done. There's a name for that kind of therapy. I forgot what it's called, but there's something to be said for just talking out these things until the point where you get a little bored of them and they lose their potency in your emotional systems.
Dust of Euroscan it's an amazing piece of work, an incredible album. Did you have a goal in particular with that album in terms of what you wanted to achieve with in terms of the reaction that you wanted people to have from it?
I must say I released it pretty hastily after I returned. I had a dozen songs that I'd written from my first stint in Afghanistan, and I just wanted to get them out as quickly as I could. In retrospect, I probably should have taken a little longer and had a more strategic view of how to promote it and all that. So in my typical way, I mean, I was working 4 days a week at the time, so I was a bit flat out, but I just put it out there in the world, and it's been a slow burner. It has sort of, over the years since I released it, had an impact on the market. I think, people know about it.
And of course, soon after the book of the same name came with it. Tell us the emotions you went through putting that together.
No, that was even more involved. I mean, obviously, writing a song can take anything from a day to a week, but a book was a 6-month exercise of trawling through my journals in great detail, and then processing things and distilling things, and it really did get a lot of things out of my system writing that book. I got to say, it's not a process I would undertake lightly unless I had something very particular to talk about. But in the end, I felt lighter for having written it. That's for sure.
Now, since you've returned, we've seen a more personal side of your songwriting. Do those more personal songs come easier to you than songs inspired by the events of the wider world?
No, the songs about Afghanistan came very easily. I mean, they sort of banged the door down, really, and demanded to be written. The more personal stuff, I think that actually takes a bit more digging in a funny kind of way.
So there's definitely a different writing process involved.
The stuff I wrote about Afghanistan, I still wrote in a sense from things that were inside me, things that I'd internalized, that I knew about. Although some of the Afghanistan songs I researched, I knew a bit about a particular situation, say the Battle of Derapet or the situation on a forward operating base in Helmand Province, for example. I knew a bit about it and then had a hunch that I wanted to write a song in that direction, and then researched it further through the internet, etc., and conversations and media. The more personal internal stuff obviously requires no overt research, but sitting still in a chair can help.
Mm. No doubt a life-changing experience for you over there. How was the transition for you returning back to home life here in Australia?
Actually better than one would expect. I'd made these transitions badly in the past when I returned, for example, from Bougainville in my late 20s. I didn't do it very well, but having done it a few times, I did it better these times, partly because I'm a bit older and a bit wiser, partly because I came to realise what a great place Australia is relative to a place that's dysfunctional of southern Afghanistan, and partly because the last time I came back from Afghanistan, my wife gave birth to a little girl, and so I have a daughter now, and that keeps you a bit focused, and is also a source of great joy.
So you're still with the department. Do you envisage a time ever where you're going to have to make that choice, one way or the other?
Well, I hope not. You know what I mean? I'd always sort of felt in my late 20s that working at the Foreign Affairs Department was getting in the way of the music career. But a music career in Australia is a pretty miserable thing to start with. Secondly, it's part of my DNA, the Foreign Affairs Department, for better or worse. I grew up in the organisation for all of the change that entails, constantly moving every 2 or 3 years, and all that implies for a young person's psyche. The only constant in my life has been the Foreign Affairs Department. I'm born a bureaucrat. I'm a bureaucrat with a songwriting problem, basically.
As someone you've collaborated with, Liz Frensham, tell us about how that association began, and what is it about her that makes her the right collaborative match for you?
Okay, yeah. Well, that started in the late 90s. After I returned from Bougainville for reasons I can't explain, I started writing songs. The writers started writing songs from a woman's point of view, imagining a woman's voice singing those songs, and I liked these songs and felt compelled to do an album about it, and put feelers out for looking for the right girl, so to speak, and eventually some friends sent me in the direction of Liz Frensham, and we got together and played a little show or two, and it sort of worked, and so we did the album, which was an intense experience of just coming to terms with working with another artist, the compromises and all that sort of stuff. It was not easy, I've got to say. I did not envisage that the working relationship would last that long, but here we are 15 years later, still working together, particularly in Victoria, and we did a second album, and she obviously sings a number of songs on Dust of Uruzgan, and it's a terrific collaboration for a number of reasons. Mainly, firstly, she's a sublime double bass player who understands how songs work. She has a great voice, but also when she hits the stage, she serves the song. Her attitude is she has a reverence for songs and good songwriting, and when she's on stage or in a recording studio, her only commitment is to make that song work, and that's a shared interest we have, and for that reason the collaboration has lasted, and I think I expect it to remain pretty fruitful for the foreseeable future.
I saw on your website your live performances being described as Noel Coward meets Loudon Wainwright. Does that description sit well with you?
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that. I like Noel Coward's stuff and that particular kind of humour he presents with. Yeah. I don't mind Loudon Wainwright either, though I find him a little unmusical. But his directness and wry outlook is worth observing, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of live performances, before I let you go, you've got one coming up here in Melbourne in a couple of weeks at the Kingston Arts Centre with the Seashanties Choir. Tell us about that.
Yes, so I mentioned earlier that a lot of my early writing was sort of thinking men's drinking songs, rousing choruses and unwholesome themes, and I recorded an album of those songs called Urban Seashanties in collaboration with the Spooky Men's Chorale back in 2009, and somehow that's morphed into this project with the Kingston Arts Centre to have those sea shanties. Well, they're not all sea shanties, they're emotionally sea shanties. They're just rude songs with big choruses, some more cerebral than others, performed by my band and a 60-piece choir and a Wurlitzer.
Wow.
I don't even remember how that came to pass, but it's going to happen on the 7th of September at the Kingston Arts Centre. It's an entertaining little show we put together. Much less war and death than my usual performances, but amusing nonetheless, I hope.
Sounds like a great night. And what else is on your books for the rest of the year?
Yeah, good question. Good question. I'm in a bit of disarray at the moment. I think I've got some more songs to write, and that I'll record another album before Christmas, I think.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's what I think I'll do, but anything could happen, you know.
Great. Well, we look forward to that. Hey, Fred, thanks for your time. Thanks for all the wonderful songs so far, and long may you reign in both careers for many a year.
Well, long may I get away with it. It's more accurate way to describe it. Thanks, John. Good to talk to you.
Good on you, Fred. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.